Okay, great. So I work at the Food Research and Action Center, and I am a policy analyst. And at Frack, I work on expanding participation in the summer and after-school meal programs. So I'm sure everyone here on the call is familiar with school breakfast and school lunch, and hopefully after-school meals. But there are really important programs that take place when the school year ends. And this conversation and topic is so timely because we know that COVID-19 has really impacted families. It's really impacted the school day. We know that many schools across the country had to close in March. So when those programs, or when the schools closed, sometimes the programs had to close as well. So we know that kids who rely on those school meals weren't getting the same nutrition. So there were some really great waivers and flexibilities that made it easier for programs to operate. And a lot of those have actually continued into the summer. So I'm going to walk through some of those, give an introduction to the summer nutrition programs, and then just provide some key strategies to think about in your community to increase access. So we make sure that every kid has healthy meals during the summer, and then they go back to school ready to learn and ready to be engaged. So just quickly before I really dive in, I wanted to just give some background on Frack and who we are. So we are a leading anti-hunger organization based in DC, although I do work remotely from Berkeley, California. So it was really great to see all the California organizations on today's call. So our goal really is to end hunger, and how we do that is by improving public policies and then also providing technical assistance around the federal nutrition program. So I get to do that. I get to work with a lot of great state and national groups. I get to work with Daniel Hatcher quite a lot on trainings and going to conferences to talk about these programs, because if you do provide summer or after school programming, providing meals is a really key part of that. A lot of programs I know provide those out of your pocket, so you can tap into this federal funding source to be able to reallocate those funds to other things. So in addition to the training that we do, we also conduct a lot of research because we think it's important to kind of have that data and statistics to really make the case for improving these programs. We have a team that works with Congress to make changes to the program to make sure that they're reaching every eligible family. And then, like I mentioned, we do provide a lot of coordination and training. I work on summer and after school meals, but we have a great team at Frack who work on breakfast and SNAP and WIC and all of the federal nutrition programs. So while I'm here to talk about summer, if anybody has any questions about those other programs, I'd be happy to try my best to answer them or to connect you to whoever can at Frack. All right. Before I dive in, I thought I would utilize this great chat box and just ask if you serve summer meals in your community. And if you don't, have you heard of this program before? So I'll just give everybody a minute or so to kind of give your input in the chat box. So whether you serve summer meals or if you're not, have you heard of this program before? All right. Yes, no. Great, thank you. We'll give everybody another minute. In the meantime, I'll just give a little insight into our organization. This little graphic on the side of the screen here, this little girl with the box of cherries is actually my boss's daughter that we use for one of our reports. So I think that's the cutest picture ever. Wanted to highlight that. All right. So it looks like there's definitely a mix of serving, maybe through the federal nutrition programs or maybe through some other source of funding. So this is great. Yes, a lot of people have heard of the program. All right, so it sounds like there's a mix of participation and awareness. So I think my presentation will get everybody up to speed here. All right. So before I really dive into the programs, I just wanted to give a little bit of context. We know that during the summer, during a regular year, summer can be a really hard time for families. Not only is that food insecurity rising because kids no longer have access to school meals, we know that kids are also more likely to see spikes in obesity and then also that learning loss. So the summer nutrition programs are great because not only are they providing the free meals for kids, but they're also oftentimes providing programming, although we do know that this is a little bit different because of COVID. A lot of summer programs have been impacted. And the other thing that I wanted to flag here is that we know that because of COVID, food insecurity rates are actually higher than they have been since I think the stat that I saw, the Great Depression, the food insecurity is really rising. And we also know, because schools ended so early, that the learning loss that kids will have when they go back to school is already at record highs. So that all kind of sets the scene for how important these programs are. So the summer nutrition programs, like I mentioned earlier, they are federally funded. So the easiest way to think about them is just as an extension of school breakfast and school lunch. So they're run by USDA, they're administered in every state through the Department of Education, very similar to those school meals that you may be familiar with. But nonprofits, government agencies, food banks, all kinds of programs can participate in summer nutrition programs. So they provide free meals and snacks to children 18 and under. Up to 2 meals a day can be served at most sites. The great thing about these programs is that they do have to meet a USDA meal pattern standard. So you know that the meals are healthy and nutritious, and there's fruit, vegetable, grain, protein, and a milk. Recommend, if you're new to this, to come on as a meal site first, because you can get familiar with the program, and you want to take it a step further and get reimbursement for the meals, handle all of that, you can move on to being a sponsor. The great thing is that in every state, there are existing sponsors that can take you on as a site underneath them. So whether it be a school district, which I know in the chat box, many of you mentioned that you do work with schools. So you can just kind of operate underneath them as a meal site. So it's a little bit easier. It's still the same, outcome. All right. So this is a lot. Just bear with me. And if you have any questions, happy to talk through them. But like I mentioned earlier, USDA has made many changes to the program, because we know that usually kids come to a meal site, they sit together, they eat together. We know that just wasn't the case for many months, and it still really isn't the case in many communities. So there are many flexibilities that have come about to help with that. So usually the meals have to be consumed on site. USDA has actually allowed for parents and kids to pick up the meals and take them home. So that's a huge thing. That's never the case with this program, but it does make it safer and supports that social distancing that we know is in place. Usually kids have to be present to get the meals. During the summer, parents can actually pick them up and take them home. There's no activity or enrichment component required. If programs can't meet the meal pattern, so like I mentioned earlier, there are specific things that have to be served to meet the menu pattern. So there is flexibility there. Non-eligible areas can participate. So if you're not meeting that 50% mark, you can still serve meals, because again, we know that more families are eligible, and there's just no way to get those updated numbers right now. And then the last thing that I'll mention is that usually kids come to a summer meal site every day, they do an activity, then they go home. Again, to support social distancing, what USDA is allowing programs to do is actually to take multiple days worth of meals home. So they can go on a Monday, get meals for the whole week, and then come back the next week. So all of these have been put into place to really support what's happening right now. And if you have any questions about this, feel free to keep sticking those in that chat box, and I am happy to address those. All right, so with that, I just wanted to mention some of the things that we're seeing in communities. So like I mentioned, in March, when a lot of schools closed, programs basically went from doing normal school meals to shifting to this non-congregate grab and go system. So what we've seen a lot of is communities taking a look at what's happening in their area. Are schools the best bet? Is it the YMCA that's the best bet? Is it the community center that's the best option for families? And from there, they can kind of place those meal sites to be the best option for families. So grab and go have been great. The drive-through model, which is pretty self-explanatory, but families drive up in their car, volunteers will put them in the car, and they'll be able to drive home. In the beginning, we also saw schools that were using their school buses to basically go along the same route that they pick up kids in the morning and drop off the meals at the bus routes, which was really great in rural areas. We also know that, some schools closed down and they weren't able to provide the same level of instruction. So they were providing like free resources of activities and other things. I know a lot were working with libraries to add book drops or food drops. So basically kind of taking that meal program and then adding other services on top of it. And I would say that schools were really leading the charge on this to begin with. But since then, we've seen food banks come in, YMCAs, Parks and Rec, everyone who usually does meal programs or serves youth have been able to step in and to provide meals, which has been really great to see. All right, and I'm just taking a break to make sure I'm not missing anything exciting in the chat box, but we can get to those questions. So when we think about this summer, and I think we know that programming isn't happening at the same level, but there are some that are happening. We know that regardless, the need to increase participation in summer meals is as high as it's ever been. So I wanted to leave everybody or talk through kind of 3 big strategies that we see when you think about expanding access to summer meals. So the first one is to serve meals. So everybody on this call, if you're interested, if you have a program, if you have a community location, you're in an eligible area, you can serve meals. So this may not make sense to you if you're not providing the same level of services, or if maybe you're building up for next summer, but that is an option. The second one is something that's really important as well, and that is to increase awareness. So one of the things that we hear every summer is that a main barrier to participation is just that families don't know where summer meal sites are. And I would say too that it's even a little bit trickier this year, because if families have participated in the summer meal program, they're used to a very certain way that it works, where you go to a site, they do an activity, that's kind of set in stone. And then this year it's very different, where the messaging is, come drive up, come walk up, you can get a meal and go home. So there's a lot of, I wouldn't say myth busting, but definitely some confusion as parents adjust and families adjust to what this new program will look like. And then the third strategy that we recommend is to expand partnerships. So we know that not everybody will be able to serve meals. Maybe you don't have the capacity to help to increase awareness, but there's always a need to bring more partners to the table. So I'm going to walk through all 3 of these. And then at the end, I would love to know if one of these really resonate with you and you think you could commit to those, to one of these in your community. All right, so I kind of hinted at this, but the first one is to serve summer meals. So we know that adding summer meal sites is a big part of expanding participation. We know that every community really needs more sites. So like I mentioned earlier, you can operate as a site underneath another sponsor. So that sponsor would take on the responsibility of the paperwork and the training. You would just be able to serve meals. So I did list here USDA's website, where it's broken down by state, but you can find the state agency that runs the program in your area. So if you email them and you say, I live in Berkeley, California, or I run a program in Berkeley, California, I want to serve meals, can you connect me to a sponsor? They will be able to do that. And I'll just flag too that I'm here as a resource. If you end up not being able to get in touch with them or have any other questions, I would be happy to connect you to a sponsor in your area. So serving summer meals is definitely a big part. And then the next thing that I wanted to mention is to promote summer meals. So again, raising awareness, letting families know where they can find a summer meal site. Even if you don't serve summer meals, you can use your network to tell families where they can go. So I'm going to try to open up this map because it's a really great resource, and hopefully this works. All right, so this map that I pulled up, and I'll go back to my slides so you can see the link, but this is actually a new tool that USDA launched for this summer, but it's called Meals for Kids. And basically you put in your address, and I just put in Berkeley, California, that's where I'm based. You can actually find the summer meal sites that are located near you. So I'll just click on this one. So it's a park. If you go here, you can see the location, you can see when meals start and when they end, what days of operation, what time meals are being served. So this exists for every state and community across the country. It's a really great resource. If you have like a newsletter or you use social media, even just sending out sample tweets to share where this is great and will help families get connected to meals. So I'll just bring up my other slide. I'm so proud of myself. All right, so it's here's the link, fns.usda.gov, Meals for Kids. If you just simply type in summer meals, meals for kids, it will all show up. And this is just a screenshot of that same map. So highly recommend utilizing this. Newsletters, social media, making sure your networks and partners are sharing this out. So this is kind of just reiterating what I just said, but there are many ways to get the word out. Many states also have their own kind of outreach materials. So this example here is one from a school district, but there's been a lot of reframing over the last couple years about summer meals because, as you may be familiar, there is stigma to accessing meals at school during the summer. So the more we can make this seem like a fun thing or something for the whole community, the more we can make it just normalized so more families will participate. And this flyer on the right is from a time when kids were gathering at picnic tables and doing activities, which again may not be the case, but it is a good way to just share those out, and every state does have some version of this. So spreading awareness is definitely key. The next one that I wanted to touch on is just the importance of partnership. So I know that in your day-to-day life and work, you have partners that you work with, and they may not be familiar with this program and how important it is to meet the need of families. So I've just listed here, like in our work, many organizations that seem to come up and seem to really work on summer meals and food insecurity and food access in general. So obviously food banks are a big part of that. Every state has an anti-hunger organization that basically tracks what's happening in the state, does policy work, works to expand the programs. So this is just a list, and the thing I would flag too is that we are in the summer, but we're going to start to look ahead to the school year and after school meals and access to school meals. So how do we keep building on these partnerships? How do we take what you build this summer and then roll that into the fall and into next summer? So I wanted to just leave you with a couple of these ideas of organizations to reach out to. I know that one thing that I am really excited about is just how much mayors and city agencies and elected officials have gotten on board with this, and the more they've really stepped in to promote and talk about how important these programs are. And then along with partners, here are just some things that they can help with and that you can help them with. So promoting, which we've talked about, volunteering with meal service, leading activities at sites if it's possible. We have been seeing some where it's very set up physically distant, where someone will lead an activity if families feel comfortable with it. We know that every community is safely donating time or money, helping to identify additional sites, and then engaging parents. Some meal sites, depending on if they have the funding for it, are providing parent meals. So I think I made this clear, but just in case, these meals are for kids 18 and under, but oftentimes parents are coming to the site as well. So if we can provide them additional resources or maybe partnering with a food bank to do a food drop along with the meals, it's a great way to build those partnerships. All right, so I feel like I just got through a lot and running short on time, and I want to get to questions. So I just wanted to pose this to you. So with everything I went over, serving as a meal site, helping to increase awareness by sharing that map, or I'm losing my, expanding partnerships. Is there one that really resonated with you, one that you think you could, after this webinar, take and implement in your community? So feel free if you want to just add a couple thoughts to the chat box. I'll let that go for a minute. Increase awareness, great. And there are sample social media posts and blogs that we can share as a resource after this call. But I know sometimes it's easier just to take what's already there and just to push that out rather than creating it from scratch. Awareness and participation. Awesome. All right, so quickly, I'm going to wrap up. So I can get to questions, but I did want to just leave you with a couple other thoughts. So we know that moving into the school year, things will continue to look very different. We've heard that school schedules could be staggered, a week on, a week off, a day on, a day off. It's going to look very different. So USDA actually announced late last week that school breakfast and school lunch and CACFP can be non-congregate. So it will be that same model where if the school isn't in session, meals can go home with the kids so that they can eat, the students, so they can eat it when they're at home. So there's going to be a lot of need to change things, to adjust. After school programs are kind of thinking the same thing. So there will be some flexibilities, and we are working on developing some resources to kind of flesh this out. But we wanted to just put this on everybody's radar. If you do have an after school program and you are planning to be back in session in the fall, if you're not serving meals, is that something that you could add? Are there new partners that you could reach out to? Could you reach out to the school district to get meals provided? So just some things to think about. We know that this, again, everything is kind of being developed now, but it's the right time to start thinking about it. All right, and really the last slide before I open it up for questions. Another great resources that I wanted to leave everybody with is one called Pandemic EBT. So this came about when schools closed. We got funding secured to provide, basically, if you're familiar with SNAP or food stamps, this is for families who have kids who are eligible for free or reduced price meals. So they'll get a card where they get benefits on it that they can use at the grocery store to buy food. So as of now, we have
it says implementation. I don't know whether it's a school district or a community-based organization. They're asking, how can you keep from stepping on toes when reaching out to form partnerships? So can you maybe provide an example of a partnership that you've seen, a promising practice, or someone that's done a very successful partnership
Sure. And
around this?
this is definitely something that it does come up, especially when someone is running the meal program. It can be not territorial, but we know that there are different politics in place sometimes. But when it comes down to it, I mean, if we're all trying to expand access, if you're just trying to support efforts that are underway, or maybe start a meal site in an area that's not being served right now, I think there is room at the table for everyone, and sometimes it is just reaching out, letting them know, like, hey, I'm a community organization. We know that food insecurity is a huge deal. We're trying to support our community. How can we amplify your efforts? How can we support you? How can we work together? So I think the best thing to do is to reach out and have that conversation. And I would say too, I mentioned the anti-hunger organizations earlier, but there's one in every state, and they have a really good sense of what's happening everywhere. So if there is a food bank that maybe likes to not have control but lead things, like maybe they can be like a connector. So I think it is just making sure that it's all about amplifying efforts. No one's trying to take ownership or step on everyone's toes. Everyone has the same end goal, to increase participation in these nutrition programs. So a specific example doesn't come to mind right now. I'm sure it will as soon as I stop talking, but I'll add it to the chat box. But I think that would be my recommendation, and if that person wants to chat more, I'd be happy to do that offline. Great. And then I did see a question, or someone mentioned that there are no sites showing up on the map for upstate New York. That's interesting. I think USDA should have all the states, but I can check into that, and I'll write that person's name down and would be happy to follow up with you. The other thing I would say too is that is USDA's map, but then some states have their own map too, or if you go to their website, they'll have like a list of the summer meal sites. So that could be another option, although I know that map is really a great one. Okay, so it shows for the city, but not upstate. Gotcha. Okay, well, yeah, I can look into that for you. Great. Well, I want to be mindful of time and just leave everybody with a few more things. So we do a lot of work around summer and after school meals. So you can subscribe to our newsletter, and different webinars and resources that we have are all on our website, frack.org. And then here is just where you can find us if you're interested in learning more on our social media. And then my contact information is there at the bottom of the screen.